Good afternoon, folks. We'd like to call our meeting to order for February 26, 2018. Confirmation of the agenda. Any additional item? Okay. Confirmation of minute, January 29, 2018, that the Ottawa Police Service Board confirmed the minute of 29 January 2018 meeting. Confirm. Thank you. Declaration of interest? No. Thank you. We'll start with the committee meeting. We had two committee meetings in January and in February. We'll start with the Policy and Governance Committee. Mr. Chair of that committee, Member Nicholson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Policy and Governance Committee committee actually met on January 19th and again on February 17th. Now, the minutes of January 19th are in your package, although at the last board meeting, we did report on the matters we discussed at that meeting, which was primarily the board work plan. On our February 7th meeting, we received a presentation from the service on the acquisition of two remote pilot aircraft systems, which is made possible by funding from Safer Roads Ottawa. We also began discussing board community outreach efforts in terms of who we want to go out to and whom we want to hear from. And we want to ensure that the people that we're reaching out to are those we haven't traditionally heard from. So this is the board's role in delivering a strategic plan or a business plan for the police service for the next 3 years. So we are still discussing the who, and we will soon be discussing the how, right, Randy? And when and what in terms of our outreach plans. So that was the content of our board meeting, of our committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member Hubley, the chair of the Complaint Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Complaints Committee met in camera on February 1st. The committee had previously received one request from a member of the public to review their service complaint. The committee made recommendations as to the disposition of the complaint, and this will be considered by the board in camera later. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hubley. Said the Ottawa Police Service Board received this report for information on the item received. Thank you. Any inquiries? No? So we'll go through the consent agenda and we'll come back for our presentation. So item number 1, we do have a presentation from Deputy Chief Skinner. So we'll hold item number 1, and item number 2 also going forward framework. They've diversified the OPS Sworn Workplace presentation, so we'll hold item 2 as well. Item 3 is the Chief's verbal report. Item number 4 is a board committee appointment, executive director report that the Ottawa Police Service Board approved the appointment of member Goldstein to the complaint committee, replacing Councillor Hubley, and to the community award selection committee, replacing member Velikat. On the report? Okay, thank you. Item number 5 is the Canadian Association of Police Governance membership renewal, that the Ottawa Police Service Board approved payment of $5,945 to the Canadian Association of Police Governance for its 2018 membership fee. Okay, thank you. Also, item number 6 is the Ontario Association of Police Service Board annual conference, that the Ottawa Police Service Board approved the attendance of myself, Vice Chair Smallwood, Member Goldstein, and the Executive Director to the annual conference of Ontario Association of Police Service Board to be held on May 23rd to 26th in Blue Mountain, Ontario. On the item, okay, thank you. Appointment of Special Constable Carleton University, that the Ottawa Police Service Board approved the appointment listed in document 1 as a special constable pursuant to section 53 of the Police Service Act in accordance with the term and conditions set forth in the attached approval of appointment form. On the item? Okay, thank you. Item number 8 also is appointment of special constable to the Ottawa Police Service. Chief's report. The Ottawa Police Service Board approved the reappointment listed in document 1 as a special constable pursuant to section 53 of the Police Service Act in accordance with the term and conditions set forth in the attached approval of appointment form. Okay, thank you. Item number 9 is conciliation plan on future development of conduct and energy weapon, obviously known as a taser, that the Ottawa Police Service Board approved the consultation plan on the future deployment of conduct energy weapon as outlined in this report. Item 2, receive this report for information.
We're going to have a report. I'd like to ask some questions.
You have some questions? Okay, we can hold item number 9. Okay, thank you. Item number 10 is the workforce management report, and that the Ottawa Police Service Board approved the appointment of sworn officer identified in document 2 and received this report for information. Any question on this item? We do have some new guests that they will be introduced earlier from the chief. So, but on this report, can we carry it and receive it? Receive and carry. Okay, thank you. Item number 11, performance report, fourth quarter 2017, Chief's report, that the Ottawa Police Service Board received this report for information. Just congratulations to our staff, because this item really got my attention, because it said in 2014, we're talking about the expanding of online reporting. It was 1,700 reports received in 2014. Now we have up to 16,000 last year. So congratulations. I think the message is working, and our residents are reporting online. Item number 12 is a Positive Workplace 2017 annual report, that the Ottawa Police Service Board received this report for information. See? Item number 13, report on SIU investigation, that the Ottawa Police Service Board received this report for information. Thank you. Item 14, outstanding board inquiries in motion February 2018. Received. Item 15 is Chief's report, that the Ottawa Police Service Board received this report for information. Thank you. And we'll go on camera after. So I'm going to turn it to the Chief for item number 1, the new cannabis legislation and the impact on policing in Ottawa. And we have a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the board well knows, federal legislation is coming into effect sometime this year, potentially July or this fall, and all police services across Canada are working very hard at ensuring that they have a plan in order to be able to operationalize and train and acquire the necessary equipment to make sure we respect the new legislation. Deputy Chief Liz Skinner, Inspector Murray Knowles, and Staff Sergeant Jim Devine is the team that is getting ourselves ready for this new legislation, and they're here tonight to give you a presentation on the framework and the approach that we are taking to make sure that we are ready. So, Deputy Chief Skinner.
Thank you very much, Chief. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to provide some information on this pending legislation. As you have been hearing in the media, the legislation is still in evolution. We are trying to keep up with as the legislation unfolds, and we will be in a position to respond. You guys going to run the French one too? Sorry, just going to get the French presentation as well. So I'm going to speak a bit about the legislation. Much of this has already been reported in the media, but I just want to give you a little bit of highlights from what we see to the legislation that's coming. There are a number of aspects of it that will have elements that affect policing. We know that will have a significant impact on OPS service delivery. It will impact our resources and our budget for years to come, and I will speak much more about the budget as we go through this presentation. You will see that there are impacts not only from a budget but from a governance perspective. Okay. The key unknowns. Moving on to the key unknowns. All right. As has been noted here, we are not sure when that legislation is actually going to be enacted. Initially, it was said to be July 1st. We now know that it's likely more early fall. With that, allows us a little bit more time to prepare ourselves. But unless regulations come forward, we are still kind of operating in a gray zone. The total cost associated with this legislation is still not known to us because we cannot put processes in place until we know what those rules and regulations are. We also know that because the legislation is not there, some of our processes may have to play catch-up. That is a risk for us when it comes to our officers being out on the road doing enforcement of this legislation, and we could have impacts for years to come from a civil and a legal criminal responsibility, a liability. So we are going to try and put things in place so that we mitigate some of that risk. So some of the main issues for OPS. The first one I want to talk about is employee wellness. Excuse me. So we need to recognize that our employees are also members of our community, and cannabis is going to be allowed to be used by them. There are some legislative or policy perspectives that we need to put in place. Right now we have an alcohol policy, and we will have to add on a drug policy. There are aspects of that legislation, member legislation, that we will have to ensure addresses our community and our officer safety, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Under the proposed legislation, adults can possess up to 30 grams of licit, which is legal, cannabis outside of the home. There's no restriction for indoor possession as long as it's not budding plants. So from our members' perspective, that is something they will be allowed to do, obviously not in our workplace. Possession or distribution of 50 grams or less, or 5 to 6 budding plants, will result in ticketable offenses, and we're working with the prosecutor's offices to determine what that looks like. Once again, they don't have the legislation in place so that they can understand what that means for them. One of the complexities of the legislation is our duty as an employer. We're looking at some of the evolving leadership coming from the CACP and the OACP and the industry to develop policies and SOPs. The drug-impaired driving. This is obviously one of the more significant concerns. Impaired driving is a concern in our community, and this does not help. Bill 174 actually proposes a zero-tolerance policy for novice or young drivers, and those drivers cannot have any amount of drug in their body when they're operating a motor vehicle. It does subject them to fines or suspensions. This is still being looked at by the province. It also imposes a zero drug tolerance for commercial drivers. This is also still being looked at by the province. Regardless of these two absolute prohibitions, enforcement of impaired driving by drugs poses many obstacles for us. The testing, all of the other aspects, the ability to pull vehicles over, our reasonable grounds to believe, all those aspects have not been weighed out in the legislation that's proposed. Youth consumption or possession. From a personal perspective, I think this is one of the areas that we should be most concerned with. We've done a lot of work as far as alcohol and other drug use, and now we're telling youth that it's okay to consume and possess drugs. It doesn't really make a lot of sense for us to be delivering this double entendre message. Youth under 18 will be allowed to possess 5 grams, and that's between 5 and 10 joints. So I'll leave it to you. Under the draft legislation, it may also fall on us to seize and hold property that's consumed or seized. So when we do the seizures, we will be in a position, particularly with the plants who are growing still. There may be a responsibility on us to retain those keep them growing so that they are still worth the same value when we have to return them if for some reason the charges didn't go through the courts. So when you're looking at it from a governance perspective, that does add some governance issues on whether we make the decision of dispose of and then pay that person back for their cannabis, or do we continue to try and grow it and keep it live so that we can give it back to them if the charges didn't proceed. So those are things that we're still looking at and trying to determine what they mean. So going back to the retail enforcement piece, right now the government has said that there will be operated similar to the LCBO, so there'll be a store. Right now they're talking about one store for our city as well as an online purchase. They will have exclusive rights to sell in Ontario. One of the issues for us, obviously, is we're very close to Quebec, and there may be different regulations in that province. Illegal dispensaries will continue to be illegal, and there is plans from a CISO, Criminal Intelligence Service of Ontario, to develop task force that work across the province to address some of the dispensaries that continue to pop up. And Ottawa actually is the second leader as far as dispensaries. We run about 13 to 15 on an ongoing basis. We close one and it reopens. So those are issues for us for sure. So the goals of our actual project is, they're highlighted right there. It really is about ensuring community safety and trying to adjust to the way that this is used in our community. We don't know what the uptake will be in cannabis. We can guess and we can try and put processes in place to address it, but until it actually starts to roll out, we're going to be operating a bit in the vagueness. We are operating towards that July date, but we're pretty sure now that is not going to be the date that it rolls out. So from a project perspective, we are using project methodology, so something that you've seen on a number of occasions. We have myself as the executive sponsor. We have Inspector Knowles, who's the business lead, and Acting Staff Sergeant Jim Devine, who's really the operation lead. He is working along with Inspector Knowles with a number of other leads from all the various projects that we have ongoing. We have work projects in various areas. So employee wellness is one. We have youth, and that we have to look at a diversion program there. Right now, there are no places for us to divert people, young people, if they're involved in drugs. So that is something else that our community is going to have to come up with. And obviously, we're expecting that they will be supported by the province. We also have to look at prevention from a youth perspective, controls, which would be obviously policies, procedures, SOPs. We will be looking at the procurement of specialized equipment. We have Sergeant John Kish, who is on the OACP Traffic Committee, who's basically a subject matter expert. He has been working long and hard to try and ensure that we're providing input. Right now, there is no tool that has been approved for us to use, so it's not even that we can go ahead and start to think about what this is going to look like. From a facilities perspective, as I said earlier, we may have to do upgrades as far as storage and the seizures that we do, or we might make determination to do seizures a different way. IT, the records management piece is going to be quite significant. What we are starting to do right now is to identify what the costs are to us, because we know that the province and the feds, if they do give us money, they're going to be expecting us to tell them the actual costs, probably in year 3. So we want to make sure that year 1, year 2, we're gathering that data, and it's going to be really incumbent on the IT, the modernization, to ensure that we have that data so that we're able to tell the true story of the impacts here in Ottawa. Obviously, comms, we need to ensure that we're out in the community talking about this in various levels, from the young people up to the seniors, making sure everybody understands the impacts and how it does change the way we think about our community. Training is another quite significant piece of work. Right now, we have quite a number of field sobriety officers who are able to do the testing. We have them pretty well spread across our front line, and the beauty of having a little bit of a heads up on this legislation is we were able to start getting them through our recruits. So as our recruits arrive here, they're already trained in that. The other aspect, though, of the training is drug recognition officers. That is a more advanced level of training, and right now we're only able to get that in Florida because of some of the ethics about the training that happens, because they're training on live subjects. So we're trying to figure out how that's going to work. We're working very closely with the OACP, the CACP, to ensure that whatever process we put in place is defensible when they finally get to court. Thank you. Moving on to stakeholder engagement. Pretty small writing, but you can see that there's quite a variety of people who are working on this project internally and externally. Some of the players from an external perspective that some people haven't really cast their mind to is Ottawa Community Housing. We see already that home takeovers happen in OCH residences. We want to ensure that those residents do not become grow-ops in the future. With grow-ops, you get mold and all kinds of other health and safety concerns. We want to ensure that OCH is on board with us. We're working very closely, making sure that we're bringing them along with whatever decisions we're making are aligned with the rights of their tenants. Excuse me. So the total resource implications, and you've probably heard in the media that we've been discussing a $6.2 million implementation cost. We base that on York Police. York Police has a quite robust ability to look at their data. They have dashboards there that they're able to really identify costs right down to the call type, and they're then able to tell us the cost for this type of enforcement. What we then did was look at our city and try and do comparators. There are some comparators for us. Ottawa is a little bit more of a less of a suburban area than York is. We have a slightly higher crime severity index. We have a slightly higher population, and we have a slightly lower budget, police budget. So when you start to look at those things, that's where we got the $6.2 million. For the year, for the actual implementation costs, we have $500,000 put aside in a project fund, and we are going to be looking at using that. When I talk about budget perspective, for 2018, when this legislation comes in, it's important that you all know that we do not have money set aside in our budget for implementation. So the actual operating costs are not in 2018's budget. And we don't know if we will have the numbers in time for the 2019 budget. So, those are kind of the pressures that we're all going to have to recognize and ensure that we're allowing some space for the growing or not growing new way of doing business. So ensuring that we're aligned with the business plan is obviously important to us. Excuse me. We plan, obviously, on keeping the board updated as we move forward with this implementation. As the legislation rolls out, we will continue to provide reporting to you, and that will be done by Inspector Knowles in the future, so it's important that he is very conversant in all of the aspects of this project, and you will see him a lot more as far as this implementation. We have a number of policies that we're going to have to amend. As we all know, the ministry provides us frameworks whenever we have to do policy amendments, so the likelihood is that that will be included again in the future. The financial impacts I think I've spoken about, but I cannot highlight enough that we do not know the true costs of cannabis legalization until it actually comes to us. We don't know how much of an uptake there will be in our community for this drug. And finally, on the governance piece, there are several intersection points for the board. The oversight role and the new legislation, including advocacy. York Police have their board has done a number of motions to FCM, AOM, AMO, to ensure that those organizations are clear on what the impacts might be, and that the advocacy takes place at the board level, so that we're advocating with the province and with the federal government to ensure that the legislation actually meets the needs of our community. Often when legislation is first rolled out, the realistic perspective isn't applied until later on, and we're seeing that now. Anybody that's watching the Senate or House House debates, they're seeing many questions arising out of the preliminary draft. It is our hope that some of that legislation changes so that it's more realistic and continues to address community safety. Subject to questions, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Skinner. Yeah, we do have a couple of questions. We'll start with Member Hubley, and then Turney, and then Valiquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Deputy Chief, for the excellent presentation. It certainly sounds to me like the federal government wants to implement this before police forces have a chance to put in any kind of tools that will allow you to test for the level of marijuana or THC in the blood. So that's very troubling. From what you're telling us, there's no interest in putting the delay in place until tools can be approved for testing and put into the criminal code as acceptable for testing or whatever legislation that needs to be in place. That you're probably looking at least a 6-month lag time for that?
Through the Chair, tools have not been approved yet. Health Canada is still working on identifying a tool that will be defensible in court. Impaired driving is one of the most contested court charges that we have. It would fill a library, the number of cases, because Joe Public is involved in impaired driving. So when we start to see cannabis being legalized, we are going to see a change in people's attitudes towards cannabis. And without the tools, we cannot stop drug-impaired driving. So, we know that there's carnage on our highways as a result of impaired. We have to do something to ensure that the tools are in place before the legislation rolls out. At this point, we do not have that tool.
And obviously to prevent the carnage on the highways and safety to our citizens is our first priority, but there's a second issue that you've identified here, and that is for your operations and your budget. You're going to end up with an awful lot of officers tied up in court time and presenting in court, because most of these cases will be challenged, especially if we're not getting any support from the federal government to put legislation in place that you could actually charge under and test and prove under. So I think I think that $6.2 million estimate is probably a very low estimate for what this is going to cost us. Another question I have for you based on what you just said, you were saying 50 grams will be allowed to be on a person, they'll just get a ticket for it. My understanding is that far and exceeds any daily use amount that somebody would be allowed to use. Do we know what the Health Canada or anybody says is the daily amount that someone could possibly use, and therefore reasonably you could expect that they could be allowed to carry that? Is
so,
this
Mr.
like
Chair,
5 times that, or?
Mr. Chair, 30 grams. Sorry, if I said 50, it is 30 grams.
30.
So 30 grams, between 30 and 60 joints. That is outside of the home. Inside the home, they can have as much as they want.
Right.
So they can stockpile and keep as much as they want.
I'm more worried about in the car. When you pull someone over, because they're now a threat to the community, and I'm trying to establish the daily use amount that they could have on them in a car. Realistically, I would think is 10 or less, right?
Not being a drug user, I'm not sure on that question.
Okay. Might be something to look at, because if we're going to try to influence the legislation, not 30 to 50 or 30 to 60 may be no way to justify why someone should have that much on them. Secondary question to that, Deputy Chief, is there any talk of how that's packaged? Like if it's a bag of 50 joints, someone could say, yeah, I can use that much, or my wife and I use that amount in a day. But if that's all individually packaged, as you would now say, for sale or for distribution, are you still going to be able to use that, or does that matter anymore?
Well, we will have to weigh it to ensure that it's under the 30 grams. The reason that they've given that number is they really want to get low-level drug possession out of the criminal courts. So, that is the rationale behind this. They do not belong in the courts. So, although it may seem like a relatively high amount, it's really to keep it out of the criminal court until it gets to the point where somebody is overusing drugs.
Okay. moving on to the dispensaries, what you said about the dispensaries. So can we expect in the near future that all the dispensaries that open in the city now will be closed down? What's the plan to get them out of business right away?
So this is actually going to be operated under the Criminal Intelligence Service of Ontario, and they've divided the province up. As you know, the OACP divides the province up into sectors. We are 3, and in that there will be a coordinator who then reports back to Toronto. That will be the coordination of where the task force teams actually go to. Because Ottawa and Toronto are the 2 highest areas of having dispensaries, it is my thought that we will get the task force to come here to alleviate some of those dispensaries. But unless there's other legislation to keep them closed, as we see today, we close them and they reopen.
Right, and the chief has explained this very well in the past, that part of that is a bylaw or a planning issue in there too. So there is a need for coordination here. But if this is a provincial body, that just sounds like nothing's going to happen for a while. And we're hearing, councillors are hearing from residents saying, why are these places open? It's clear in the legislation they're not going to be allowed. There's no chance of them being grandfathered. Why are they still open?
So dispensaries are open because it takes investigations to ensure that this is actually a dispensary. They usually take 3 to 5 weeks to conduct those types of investigations. So, you put a drug team on them, they do the investigation that's required, put the case together, bring it to court, and they reopen under a different name or...
Are we working yet with bylaw and building code services to get them shut down? Because they're the ones that have the power to shut it down, right?
So, Mr. Chair, we do have a committee that works with all the city partners, including planning. In fact, today was one of our meetings. We've had some conversation about licensing and bylaws, but you cannot legislate an illegal activity. So it's already illegal. So, they're making it quite clear that you can't create a license about an illegal activity. It'd be like saying that, well, I won't give an example.
Yeah, that must be very frustrating for you and the frontline officers on that.
Do you have any other questions? Because I'd like to go
very
to
fast. I think I'm still below my 5 minutes, right? Provincial, you mentioned the province is sending the OPP officers to Florida for training. I think other forces in Canada are doing the same. Is there any discussion between OPS to have these OPP officers train our officers? Because I hate to have half the police force down in Florida getting trained on things that we don't even know yet how we're going to test.
So as far as the drug recognition, that is a program that's operated by the RCMP. They provide us usually 2 seats a year. So we have 2 members that get on that training. It is not something that can be operated here in Ontario based on the ethics of testing live subjects. We are looking, because in Nicolette in Quebec, they do have a training opportunity there. So the OACP is looking to determine whether or not that will be feasible here in Ontario. But at this point, we're still in conversation. We're not at the place. Some of it is going to rely on what the legislation looks like before we can determine if that is the type of training that we need.
Thank you, Deputy Chief, and Mr. Chair, I'm done.
Thank you, Member Hubley. Member Turney.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you for that presentation. And it's funny you were mentioning your work with FCM and AMO. I'm the Ontario Caucus Chair for the FCM, and literally I was on the phone not even 3 hours ago talking to my Ontario caucus. Next week we're going to be in Laval, and this is the topic. This is what all municipalities across the entire country are wrestling with right now, and we're all in the dark. I asked many of my caucus members, where are you at? Oddly enough, I have a presentation at our police board this evening. Maybe I can glean some information and bring it to you guys in Laval so we can have that as part of our discussions. They have no information in any other areas. So when I see York with the 6.2 million, is this the number that they want to present as what they think it's going to cost them?
Mr. Chair, the presentation by York is based on a number of assumptions. So yes, that is the number they're standing by. They basically have said, and I've got a few points here, I'll just run through them, 2% of their operating budget, annual operating budget, $6.9 million per year average, or 20.7 over 3, 6.2 in one-time costs, 14.5 in ongoing costs, 7.8 in annual costs per year after 2020, and time to sufficiently train and meeting the July 1st deadline is quite challenging. And preliminary estimates with, as information comes in, this might change.
Great. And are we working with, obviously, the city, and a lot of people don't know this, but on average, a municipality has 17 different areas within a municipality. They have to make modifications to rules. For example, people can grow pot plants at home now, so fire has to be involved, OPH. There's many different facets. Is this just for the policing side, or is this in coordination with the city as well?
So it is, Mr. Chair, it is in coordination with the city. Tony Amonte is leading from the city. He actually represented the city last week in replacement for Mr. Steve Kanalakis with AMO. They were there with Windsor, Toronto, Smith Falls, Napanee, Ottawa, and York. They had conversations, and they will continue to have conversations. We have a city-led project team as well. And basically the 17 areas that you've spoken about are all at that table. We continue to have conversations, but I think it's important to remember that there is a separation between police and city. So from a governance perspective, this is going to fall to the Police Services Board to do that advocating. The city is going to be looking at it for city concerns, recognizing that the budget all comes from the same place. They are very focused on city aspects and not so much the police, so the police have to lead the way themselves.
And that's why I wanted to ask that, is I want to be very conservative in our projections of the numbers, because I'm concerned when we hear, did I hear you right, we may have to have a greenhouse to keep these plants alive?
Well, it really depends, Mr. Chair, on what the legislation says. And of course, the decision by the Police Services Board, whether or not we continue to maintain those plants or just assume the risk and sell them or destroy them, and then if the person is found not guilty, pay them the money that they would have gotten for that plant. So there are different ways for you to manage that. My view would be you destroy the plants and you pay them if you find them not guilty. It's a much lower cost than trying to operate something that would be a whole new business line for us.
Exactly. And that makes a lot more sense, obviously, but at the same token, if we don't get the choice, right, and we're told we have to have a greenhouse now to maintain plants, which I think is craziness, by the way, that's what we have to prepare for. There's a cost in that. Yeah,
I think the legislation... The planned legislation is that you'll have an option, and that will come to the Police Services Board for an overall governance decision.
Wow. And I'll wrap up on a couple of things, Mr. Chair. To follow up on my colleague's point about the pot shops, it's becoming worse and worse. And as councillors, I think it's one of the things we hear the most, because they're gateways to our downtown now. I have one, it's not in my ward, it's in my neighboring councillor's ward. I wish he would put his foot on the gas a little more on it. But the windows are all smashed out. There's plywood and spray paint all over the place. It's disgusting. It's an eyesore to the community, and I don't know how to get this thing closed. I know it's not my ward. I've definitely indicated it, and I know actions are underway now. But this is a big frustration where I'm having to use building code services and bylaw to try to shut down things that, frankly, I think there's an expectation that police can do it. I understand the challenges, but how are we going to get around that day where we flip the switch, Canada Day or whatever day it is, and like Alan says, now we're going to shut them all down. Is the province going to have that legislation in place to be able to make these things happen quicker?
Well, it still requires a criminal investigation. Criminal investigations take time. You have to have the evidence to be able to close them down, and until you have that evidence, you will not close them down. So it will not be an overnight thing. Community expectations need to be, we need to ensure that they are aware of what we can or cannot do.
Yeah, and I think that's a challenge everybody has when you see a parking lot full of people smoking weed, cars all over the place. It seems easy to people that don't have to go through the court process, and we understand that.
If I can add,
the chief answer that.
Sure. If I can add to that. So we've had a discussion before around what action are the police service doing in closing these illegal dispensaries? We have executed a number of search warrants. We have charged a number of individuals. Some of those have pled guilty. Some of them have been found guilty. Some of those are still before the courts. We are always balancing our priorities with respect to drug enforcement activity. Right now, we will continue to do some investigations around those illegal pot shops, but right now our city is facing an opioid crisis. A lot of our resources are dealing with some fairly significant investigations dealing with deaths that are happening with respect to opioids and fentanyl. And we also have a number of shootings that have taken place, which are all drug-related. So our resources have been focused on our number one operational priority right now is to stem the violence associated with guns in our community. So we are always balancing those priorities, and right now I've directed all resources to be able to deal with those two top priorities.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that answer. And I wish bylaw could do more. I think that's a big area we have to focus on. Mr. Chair, I rarely ask questions, so I got to get these out. You mentioned about... Yeah, thanks. The location. There was an indication of, you think there'll be one in Ottawa to start with?
As it stands right now, that's the preliminary conversations, is because there's going to be an online ability to purchase. So one should be sufficient, but don't hold me to the one, because I'm not writing the legislation.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I was just wondering if we have input as a city, or are they doing it as part of consultations to say which LCBO is it going to be a part of? I'd hate them to automatically make a decision where they think it should go, like everything else that has been decided.
I think there has been some conversation about appropriate places, not near schools, not near residential areas. So there are some criteria that has come to the forefront, but advocating is definitely part of the role of the PSB, and I would definitely encourage as much as possible to have those conversations with the Minister of Health, Minister of Finance, and our ministry.
Great. And two final ones. Sorry, Mr. Chair. I think there's a lot of confusion with councillors too amongst and thank you, Chief, you clarified that on the radio several times. It is illegal if you hop out of a pot shop with pot on the sidewalk. It's still an offense, correct?
To possess cannabis?
Yeah, and smoke it right on there.
Right now, yes.
Yeah? Okay, good. And last but not least, I think this is one of our biggest issues we have to deal with as part of this board. How often are we going to get updates? I'd hate to say, we'll come back in 3 or 4 months. We only have 5 left. So is this something we can expect on a monthly agenda?
Well, there's quite a bit of change, and I'm not sure if we'll have any more addition, because it seems like it's a moving target. At first we thought July is the day, then it's changed. And, the deputy is talking about, there's quite a bit of organization working together. The Ontario Chief of Police, the Ontario Police Board, we're meeting in Roma and AMO, we're talking about funding. There's many, I'm not sure if it's monthly is the right time, but I think whenever we feel there's a new information, they should bring it to us. I don't want to put a time on it, but it's got some information. We had in discussion with AMO about the funding, and it seems like as much as a problem for us as a city, but you can appreciate the small town, 325 community police by the OPP, they have barely any budget to keep policing on the ground. Now you add this to it. So yeah, there is a move, but I'm not sure if his monthly update is valid or 2 months or 3 months. But whenever we have new information, I expect the chief and the executive to bring it to us, because we want to work together with them, also to support them on the other level with the government, because our current government, as of May, they will not make any decision. So we have to, if anything we have to do, we need to work from now till May.
And that could require a special meeting, even outside of our monthly meetings as well.
Okay. We do have, and folks, let's not debate the legislation. It's there. We're just trying.
Mr. Chair, it's not debating it. It's just making sure it's on the table. But this is very important.
We don't want to debate the legislation itself, because we're not the lawmakers. We just need to work with our service to provide them the tool they need. But as the legislation, what's your opinion on it? Whether you like it, we can debate that somewhere else, but it's not here. So.
Again, I don't think I was debating it. I just want to ensure that we're being brought up to speed as a board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Madame Velikat.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Madame Skinner and your team, I would really like to know, what is for you the biggest concern about this legislation, from your perspective, from you and your team?
So from our team's perspective, we do obviously have a couple of very strong concerns. The first one is impaired driving. It's already a very significant concern in our city, in our country, and it is something that we think is not going to be helped by adding in another drug that can impair people's ability to drive. When I look at this from a resident of this city, the impact on youth is actually a bigger challenge. I've got a couple of stats here as far as the Canadian Pediatric Society has said that cannabis use more than doubled the risk of being involved in a motor vehicle collision. Drugs Free Canada found that 40% of teens between 16 and 19 think that driving high makes them a better driver. And while 1 in 5, or 21% of our high school seniors say they have ridden with a high driver. So when you start to take those kinds of numbers and make that a reality, it really doesn't bode well for the future from my perspective. Automated cars can't come quick enough if that's the reality of our future. This really is going to have a negative impact on the safety in our community and the way that our young people think about using drugs. And the other piece of young people and using this is we've done a phenomenal job as far as keeping young people away from smoking. The smoking cessation done by the City of Ottawa is through the roof. And now we're going to say smoking cannabis is okay. So it sounds like a double message to me that I think is just going to confuse young people. So we continue to work with the CACP, the OACP, MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, to really push those messages. But it's not just going to be a policing problem. It is going to be a community problem, and we'll need to do something together on it.
Thank you, Madame Bellegarde. Member Nicholson.
Well, thank you very much, Deputy, and this has been a great presentation. And thanks for reassuring us that you're looking at it. I've been sitting here just wondering, what are some of the most important lessons we've learned from other jurisdictions that have had, decriminalization or legalization, with respect to things like employee wellness, policies, SOPs, impact on youth, costs? What are some of the critical things that we can learn from? Because other jurisdictions have done it.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Chair, two of the states that we've looked at are Washington and Colorado. They've done quite a bit of work. Initially, their costs remain relatively low, but now they're seeing that the uptake has increased significantly, and they are seeing the costs increased to the same levels. They're going through the roof for them. The use of cannabis has increased significantly in those two states, but it's really early on. It's only been a few years for us to have data to be able to analyze and look at what the future actually looks like. And can't say enough that the United States is not Canada. So, we are really operating in the dark here. We do not know what the uptake's going to be, whether or not people are going to use while they're driving. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Public messaging was one of the key pieces that both those jurisdictions, when they re-looked at the way they did things and unrolled their procedures, public messaging was something that they could have worked harder on. Yep.
Thank you, Member Nicholson. Member Goldstein.
Thank you. So one concern that I have is all the reports say that young people, especially under age 25, who use cannabis, especially on a regular basis, are more prone to mental health issues down the road. Have we looked at that? Are we analyzing what the long-term impact is going to be on development of things like schizophrenia and other mental health issues for our youth?
We have not looked at that. Public health is on the committee with us, and they are looking at that. Certainly the research that I've read, schizophrenia and Parkinson's are two factors that they're now seeing in people. But, you can find research that says anything if you wanted to. I think now that we've said that we're going to legalize it, they'll probably start doing a lot more research on what it looks like. Unfortunately, there may be a generation of people who use and don't understand the consequences for themselves.
Any other question? So thank you very much, Deputy. One of the area, Deputy, you talk about working with the city and the general manager. I think there's a lot of us in this room involved with other organizations in Ontario, whether Roma, AMO, FCM, the Chief of Ontario. If there's something on that level of that table you're talking about, you need some motion to be sent to our local government and local ministers. I think we need to work together on this. I know AMO was always concerned about the cost, and they were successful to receive 3/4 of the proceed to the provincial government versus the federal, at least for the first year. But I mean, if something specific you think we need to ask, I think this is the time to do it now, because we can't do it in May. So if anything, you have to do it within the next couple of months.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly York Police has put together a number of recommendations or motions to AMO and FCM. I have copies of those. I think it might be something that we consider. I think that anywhere that we can advocate to put more controls and restrictions and understand what this legislation actually means will put us in a better place.
Well, as you heard, our colleague is on FCM. We have somebody from AMO. I'm Roma, and the Ontario Associate Police Board. Our chief is with the Ontario Chief. I think we need that to coordinate and say, wait, maybe the City of Ottawa can present them also to support the City of York, because York didn't ask us as a city to support them. But I would suggest we should do it as a city, basically. But we need your guidance, which one we should be asking for and support for.
Thank you. I think coming from the city meeting today, it's clear to me that we as the police service have to do our own advocating. The city is going to advocate on their behalf, and we are going to have to come up with a communication strategy and an advocacy strategy, and that is part of our work plan.
Okay. Thank you very much. And on the deputy presentation, Steve, thank you. And item number 2, go forward framework, diversifying the OPS 1 workplace. We have a presentation. We turn it to the chief.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Deputy Chief Skinner, for the work you've done with your team. So as we're preparing for the next presentation, just to remind the board that in September we came and talked about an introduction to our new outreach recruitment strategy. In November we gave a presentation to the HR committee, and today we are coming back with more meat to the information as to how we are moving forward with the important work of diversifying our workforce. It will link to a couple of inquiries that we have received from board members over the past couple of meetings. And in line with that message, I just want to recognize 4 of our new inspectors that are in the room tonight. Inspector Paul Burnett, Inspector Ken Bryden, Inspector Jim Ells, and Inspector Heather Lachine were just promoted last week, so congratulations. Outstanding members of our police service, and 2 other inspectors that couldn't be here tonight, Isabel Granger and Patricia Ferguson, are also promoted. So very proud of them, and the future continues to look great. We have an amazing pool of inspector candidates that are ready for promotion, and we continue to do the difficult work around and the important work of diversifying our workplace with great people. Turn it over now to Director General Fraser, Inspector Carl Cartwright, and Staff Sergeant Debbie Miller.
Just before you start, Director, I just want to say on behalf of the board, congratulations to our new inspector, and look forward to working with you folks in the future, and our best to the 2 who cannot be here tonight. So, Director General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We're going to share the presentation tonight, and I'll kick it off. We want to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight so that we can bring you up to date on the work we've been doing since we were last here in September and at the HR committee in November. And our goal has been to gain input so that we can finalize the framework that we'll be relying on to diversify the OPS workforce. We know we're facing a significant challenge because over the next 5 years we expect to hire between 400 and 500 additional sworn officers. Those officers would both replace retirees as well as fill spots that come about as a result of the growth in the police service, and I'm speaking of the 30 additional officers per year that we've added to the budget. Currently, when we translate that into the number of prospects that we need to meet, that's probably about 1,500 potential police officers. And that's assuming that 1 out of every 3 of our prospects becomes a successful hire. We've identified some of the areas that we want to reach into to broaden the diversification of the workforce, and that's come about from our work on gender. We need more women in the police service. We need more Indigenous members. We need more people from the LGBTQ community. We need more racialized members, and we need members with different cultures and languages. And we put a little graphic up on the slide to show you that just out of the 2016 census, the range of languages that are now predominant in Ottawa after the 2 official languages. So Arabic, Mandarin, Chinese, Cantonese, and Spanish. And if you combine Chinese, Cantonese, and Mandarin together, you'd see how significant that group in our community is. Stand by. There we go. As we go through the presentation, you'll see that we've divided it into a couple of parts so that you can help understand the 3 aspects of the challenge that we're facing. We've learned some lessons from the gender audit, some very significant ones, and we'll be applying those to make immediate changes to our current recruitment process. Because we've understood from that work how systemic barriers creep into or slant into the recruitment process, and we want to make sure that we eliminate those and become more aware of our current process. We'll gain some additional information in the next 18 to 12 months as the diversity audit unfolds. So we've got the RFP is out on MERX right now to locate this new partner to help us with that work. And as we do it, we know that we're going to find other systemic barriers that will come alive to and change our process around. But any of these changes will have limited impact if we're not able to address the very front end of the recruiting process. And right now that sits under the constable selection process. We're one of the users of the process, and we know that we need to understand more about what barriers might exist for members of all backgrounds participating in that process. At the end of the presentation, I'll give you some specifics about some of the data we've found so far. But this is an issue, the notion of barriers into the constable selection system. That's an issue for all police services. It's one that OACP is working on, and we'll be working with them to provide more data to support the need for changes to the process. I'm going to turn it over to Carl now for the next part.
In continuation to this presentation, also to some of the items that we mentioned at our last presentation, Mr. Chair, some of the best practices that we're looking into and we have looked into. One of the great challenges is that we're all reaching to the same pool for candidates. In looking at to some of our partners, the Ontario Provincial Police, just to mention, they're also looking at streamlining their processes. They're looking at a 3 to 6 month process. They have an extremely capable online presence, more than ourselves, and they go and do some virtual ride-alongs and use media, use the technology in different ways in attempting to reach their candidates. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police themselves, they're streamlining their process where they're accepting candidates higher education and not going through the entire testing phases of doing the written test. And the Edmonton Police Service was highlighted just a few months ago, and they have certain programs which we're also looking at what some of our partners are doing. So everybody is attempting to streamline their process and looking at some of the best practices. We're doing the same. The Edmonton Police Service just a few months ago was in town, and we're having a conversation. And they're dealing with the same obstacles, but they're extending their reach beyond their own province and throughout the country. One of the items we're also going to be looking at moving forward is our outreach. Outreach is increasing our outreach internally within our own members and externally. The outreach that we currently have is that I'm going to go into detail how we're going to tackle the outreach process itself. And secondly, streamlining the process. Also, I've indicated how other agencies have gone through highlighting their process and streamlining their process. I'll go into detail in the next slide right now, which, if we look into investment into outreach team, currently we are looking at a dedicated outreach team to supplement the current recruiting team. A dedicated outreach team would not only physically enable us to reach not only those communities that we are not able to reach or that are not normally coming to the table. Right now, when we look at our process, the general applicant that comes through us educationally, I can tell you, comes from college. A great percentage comes from Algonquin or La Cité, since they're local. I can state those two. And there's programs directly directed to policing. Some may think that that's exactly where we, as a service, are looking for. It isn't. It just happens that a large number of applicants are coming there because they're already interested. Well, we're always going to get those applicants. Now, how do we get those applicants that are not generally interested in policing? We actually have to go devise a marketing strategy. Well, the initial marketing strategy is to market ourselves. And our best marketers are our own members. Putting an outreach team of individuals out there to communicate, to be visible in the community, and to reach and educate the community, not only to the police presence, to now have policing being a profession of choice, where one of the challenges we had indicated before, that is not so today, at this point. The increased community involvement will come through the outreach, but the increased community involvement is a shared responsibility. We bear that responsibility as a police service, but we're also looking for those community leaders. We're looking for members on the board to assist us in achieving this outreach and identifying those key leaders who then identify those members of our communities who believe would be well represented within the police service that we serve to represent their community. Our also communication strategy. Initially, I indicated that our outreach team, those members would be part of that communication strategy. However, we're devising currently two separate communication strategies. One is the general communication strategy, and the other one is a targeted and specific strategy to market those marginalized groups that you not see represented generally in policing. The general strategy is really to market ourselves. Not only to market ourselves, but to market our own community, the City of Ottawa, to market OPS, the Ottawa Police Service, as an employer of choice, and marketing the profession. Fairly soon, you'll actually see the banner on the side of the building being a new recruitment banner, indicating that basically we're open for business. As the Director General indicated earlier, we are going to have to hire 375 to 500 officers, I do believe, in the next 5 years. That means that if we are successful, one of out of three candidates, that's 1,500 applicants. In order to advise individuals out there that we're open, we are recruiting, we're accepting qualified candidates, we're having our recruiting team, our outreach team on the ground, okay, doing doing the hard work, and also advertising. And I was asked a question, Mr. Chair, last time about how we're going to do that. I had indicated by every means possible. It's looking at technology, look at the social media. And I believe one of my colleagues had indicated to me the proper term to be used is cross-cultural marketing. And that's an indicator when you have somebody from a particularly cultural background that may be in Ottawa. Generally, I'll speak for myself as Haitian origin. I watch all the Haitian news. I'm always looking to keep myself up to date. However, cross-cultural marketing, meaning that through the social media, be able to recognize that I'm actually not in Haiti, but I'm actually right here in Ottawa, and targeting that message through social media to those sites that I use. Google does it quite well. I seem to be always looking for material, and it seems to, the more I look at sites, the more the things I'm interested keep popping up. And that's the same way we're going to also use those sort of technology to actually address the youth out there that we're looking for. If we're looking specifically to streamlining our recruit selection process, at the end of the day, our goal really is to increase the number of candidates who are really reflective of the community. Okay, by engaging our members, by engaging our outreach team, and by engaging the community and learning about the issues, really. Learning about the issues and addressing why is policing no longer a viable career of choice. And for those who do consider policing, how do we facilitate them in entering the process? We are looking at identifying and removing all the barriers within our own processes. Okay. We are limited to our own processes, which I will go through the steps. There are approximately 10 steps to the recruiting process. We'll come into the next slide. Reducing the overall time. Currently, it can take up to over 9 months for a file to be processed from beginning to end. Our goal would be to cut approximately a third of that, about 6 to 9 months, where hopefully from the time an individual first walks through the door or just indicates their interest, hopefully have that narrowed down by 3 months. We also are looking at ensuring all the steps and processes abide by the equitable work environment policies. For example, currently interviews interviews are conducted by two versus one. Also looking at our background interviewers when they do attend and do home interviews, in-person interviews, that there are 2 individuals that currently perform those interviews. And also ensure that all trainers and all recruiters, everyone involved within the recruiting process has the gender bias analysis training, has bias neutral training, and that's provided to every single individual in the process. Also, we're currently looking at standardizing and the background investigator process and increasing a number of backgrounders. Currently in the process that, as we have it, one of the chokeholds, one of the points that we're reaching is we're not able to put a file fast enough to our background investigators. So by increasing the pool of trained background investigators, we will be able to speed up the process and be able to have more valid candidates faster. We look at the next slide. Sorry, I didn't change my own slide. The next slide shows the current recruiting process. I do mean current recruiting process. The one highlighted in green is obtaining your OACP certificate. That is currently a CSS standard that is currently run by Application Testing Services, which is the private entity that does the testing for the province. Currently, for any candidate to enter our process, they must have, and that's not our process, that's for every individual organization that abides by that, which I think the number is approximately 46 in the province. The cost of that certificate can range from anywhere to $330 if you pass it the first time, up to $400 if you have to retest one time. It's a cost. Individuals that sometimes don't have that. In our pilot process, that was moved to approximately number 6 in the process, where we looked at approximately 25 individuals we allowed for them to enter our process without having that. What that allowed us above everybody else is that nobody was looking at these candidates. But we decided to look at them first. So we give us first pick at the draft. And if they were qualified, then we mentored them and they were able to get their certificate. We actually hired from that, I said I think 25. It's between 25 and 28. 28. We hired 10. So that percentage was quite high. We're looking now making that the norm. But however, we're going to instill that into number 4. Right after number 4, right after pre-background question. The logic behind that is that sometimes it takes some time for the candidates to actually obtain that certificate, and if we move it further back, it may very well delay our process. So coming forward, once all the resources are in place, that is the current process as you will see it. It has yet to be implemented because we do anticipate once we do advertise that there's going to be an influx of candidates. And we want to make sure that we're prepared to deal with them, because it's only going to slow things down if we say, hey, we're open for business, and we don't have the people to serve you. So, but for 2018, that's one of our key things that we're going to push forward.
Mr. Chair, Inspector Cartwright has done a great job of summarizing all the internal things that we can do in order to change our recruitment. Recreating the outreach recruitment team, which we got great feedback on from the community that was an effective tool and it worked. We can streamline our processes based around the information that we looked from the gender audit. There's absolutely nothing that prevents us from doing that. And revisiting our approach to backgrounding, that's another point that we've heard about. Reordering our internal steps. Those are all things we can do on our own, and you'll see us doing them over the next, starting immediately, and hoping to be in our new environment over the next 12 months. But there are a few things that are still on the horizon that we'll need help with in order to really nail down the diversification work. We talked about the diversity audit. That's not yet within our domain, but we know that as it comes to life over the next 12 months, we'll learn more about what we can do to remove barriers so that we have a process that is fair to all and ensures that the candidates that we attract have a fair opportunity to become a sworn officer. We know that we need to work more with applicant testing services and the OACP and the ministry around the constable selection process. The profile of applicants that we're receiving right now is not consistent with who we want to hire. And I'll just use the data that was shared with us around the female candidates to give you an example. So there are 5,000 candidates who go through the applicant testing process a year. That's the first step in the whole process. 10% of them are women. Of the 10%, so we're down to 500 then, of that 10%, roughly half passed. So out of that pool, roughly 250 women are left with a certificate to which they can then apply to different police services. And we're not clear yet because the data is not available on how many actually get hired and get through the process everywhere. Constable selection doesn't make available to us any data on race or ethnicity. So we're not sure when we go to look at the next aspect of culture and language, there isn't data from that group that helps us analyze that. We've taken that to heart as well ourselves, though, because we know that we need to track data right from the beginning of our process, ask permission from candidates to look at their gender, to look at their sexual orientation, to look at their background, culture, and language, and to share that data as we move through the process. That will be new for us, but very helpful in understanding where our issues lie. We also want to, we've got a meeting scheduled with the Montreal Police early this next month to have a look at their process because they've succeeded to a greater level than we have in bringing the number of women into the police service. We've also done a little bit of background work, though, and also learned that Quebec has a much higher labor force participation by women because of other aspects of that environment. Daycare is much more accessible, training and education much more accessible. So there are some other key ingredients probably that have helped them along the way, but we want to see the exact strategies they've taken within the police service. We know that the board can help with us with the work. Primarily what people have identified is the need to add a value of diversity as part of the board's values, mission, and vision. It's important as we go forward to be able to say that the board stands behind this work, and this is one way to demonstrate that. So, Mr. Chair, I don't think we have every answer here tonight. We have a way forward, and we know that over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll put in play the things that we can control internally right away, and we'll be looking to work with our other stakeholders to find other ways to eliminate barriers and bring OPS a diversified workforce. We'll be happy to take any questions.
Mr. Chair, just to add to that, so you heard the last piece around at the root of the issue is the candidate pool is challenging. The OECP is a partner with the ministry and applicant testing services that manage that program. The board, I still sit on the OECP board, and we met 2 weeks ago in London, Ontario. And as a result of our inquiries, the ministry and ATS actually came and gave us a presentation. And I had very good discussions with Commissioner Hawks, Chief Saunders, Chief Evans from Peel, and our President Brian Larkin from Waterloo on this very issue. And we are certainly not, don't have all the answers with respect to the questions that we're asking with respect to the data. And the ministry right now is undergoing an audit of the constable selection system and looking for a way forward. And we are certainly, as the OECP board, is holding the ministry's feet to the fire with respect to identifying any systemic barriers that exist in that whole process and looking at strategies that will help us diversify and increase the number of candidates that are applying through the process. There are a number of anecdotal pieces of information that we're getting that, why women are failing at such a higher rate. There may be one aspect of the physical testing that is challenging. So we're getting data with respect to that. But certainly we've sent a strong message to the ministry that this needs to be fixed because if we want, we are all facing the same challenges with respect to hiring women and ensuring that we are reflective of the communities we serve. We're all facing the same challenges, and we need this issue fixed at the beginning.
Thank you, Director General, Chief. We have a couple of questions for you. We'll start with Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the excellent presentation and the work you're doing on this file. It's important. And I like to see the progress being made. I just have a question around the idea that you want to hire 500 new officers over 5 years, and that it will take you 1,500 prospects to do that. So that's telling me you're going to hire 1 in 3. Is that what these other agencies are experiencing? I would have thought that number would have been a lot different.
Mr. Chair, currently, more realistic, it's 1 in 5 for OPS. Based on the changes we're hoping to implement, we're hoping that in our process, it's going to be 1 in 3. And that's why you have the number of 1,500, which
so
is
currently
not
1 in 5.
It's better than 1 in 5.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Member Turney.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. It was great. And I definitely see some changes happening even on social media now as far as recruitment in general goes. So I'm very pleased to see that. Just wondering about at the high school level, whether it's through SROs or just in general going into the high schools, are we doing any of that kind of stuff right now? Because when I go out to a lot of graduation ceremonies, I talk to a lot of the kids to see what they want to do, and Some have a master plan, they're already there. Some are going to do a victory lap and take a year off and travel. And there's a lot of opportunities I find in the high schools where they haven't made those decisions yet. Do we do that right now?
Currently, our school resource officers are great ambassadors to the service. They're a great asset. The OPS does look at that everyone is a recruiter. High school students are a target area for us. What we have to realize, we focus on the high school students, that reward is like an investment in the future. That will not be seen immediately. On our last presentation, I believe it was September when we presented, it says we're looking really for that Generation X. So what is going to, the communication strategy that we're going to have now will focus on those people post the high school that have already passed their high school education, and because we do have organizational priorities, operational pressures, we need to identify those individuals and put them in the seat fairly quickly. So, however, the long-term process is using, and also when our marketing strategy is completed, for you to be able to see, you'll see that how we're going to use social media, how we're going to use to target the external partners we have reached into to actually target not only that demographic for the future, but the current demographic that we're looking at now.
And that's good news, and I agree. SLOs are great ambassadors, and they can create that kind of discussion with the students and say, hey, you should think about it. So when you're doing social media marketing, for example, you're not going to just say, oh, we're going to set it from 21 years age of older for the target on Facebook. You're going to leave the threshold much lower. It'd be like a 16 or something so you can engage people.
Mr. Chair, if I can address that, our marketing strategy will be quite wide. Not only to target individuals that are interested in policing now, but making policing a career of choice for the younger generation.
Wonderful. Good to hear. Thank you.
Good answer. Thank you. Member Smallwood, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you for the presentation. It was great. I just wondered, a comment was made about the failure rate of women applicants, and I'm wondering, do we have statistics on what the failure rate of our target group is versus the general applicants?
Mr. Chair, I'm disappointed to say that no, we don't have that, but that's our goal moving forward, is to be able to gain some insight into that data across Ontario and see how we make out, and if we can take it down one more level to see at which stages we find that the issues are. So with the chief and OACP helping to lead a discussion on data, I think we could see if we can, as a police services across Ontario, start to compare and see where the issues are.
Great. Thank you very much. The other thing is, and I'm delighted to hear that we're going to break it down by stage, and I just wondered if you have some time frame as to when we might be starting to see that information. Thank you.
I think we will be able to do it in the very short term, meaning probably in the next 3 months. We have to assure that all our literature aligns with that, so that as people disclose the demographic characteristics we're looking for, that we're clear with them that it will be part of how we track and follow through success. And once we've done that, then we have the ability to share at a high level in a public forum.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Member Nicholson? For you, sir.
Thank you very much for a good presentation. I like the progress that you've made. This is very good. A few things that I particularly liked were, I too watch a different television, not just CBC and CNN. And yes, it's really important to go where people are. That's kind of the key element here. Again, I've had a lot of complaints about the length of the process, and I'm glad to see you're tinkering with it, and you're moving, in particular, taking that ATS testing out of the very front end and moving it further down, because yes, it's a big hindrance to a lot of people where it is right now. I had Member Smallwood's question about the data that you have, but we must have some data locally, our own data, to know where do people fall out of where in the past have people fallen out of our application system? And are there some nuggets of knowledge that we can gain by looking at that?
Mr. Chair, we have data that we are actually going to assign to a data analyst to have a look at that. And we had the diagram on the screen that showed the various steps that we had. Our goal is to take as much of our previous year data and analyze it by step. What we won't be able to do is probably divide that into either men and women or other demographic groups, because we didn't ask for permission to do that coming in. But certainly by number we can identify that, and I think that will be revealing, because often that points to where there's a barrier, and then it takes a little bit of expertise to go find what the barrier is, but that's what we've learned through the gender audit and what we'll see from the diversity audit about what some of these perhaps unknown barriers are. So we can certainly go back through the last couple of years of files and gather that data. It will just be at one level.
Okay, and finally, I liked your future discussion notes that, you might want to consider coming to the board and asking us from time to time, telling us how we can help you. Certainly adding diversity as a value. I'm surprised. I thought we had that already, but we don't. So we'll have to take steps to fix that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Nicholson. Member Valiquette, Madame Valiquette.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Very good. I'm very impressed with the work that you've put together, and I have a couple of questions. One of them, I think this may have been answered already, but you're thinking of launching your marketing outreach program. Is that in May?
There was an initial date, however, there's no firm date for that yet. Once again, we want to make sure,
right.
Mr. Chair, that all the pieces are in place, that the outreach team is in place, and that we have the supporting cast for the recruitment process. As you see how lengthy it is, it's also very demanding. Once the marketing strategy does hit the ground, it does become forward, we will start slowly. One of the first things that will be seen is that banner on the 417. I personally am looking forward to it because I have to go by that building every day. So I want to see that new banner up there. That sort of indicates that, okay, the progress is being made. Now, the strategy, our own marketing strategy is in different steps.
Right.
And the first step is to actually start typing into those social media groups, into those outlets, to the cross-cultural aspect of it. Once that is underway, we better have everything in place to be able to handle what I believe will be the influx of candidates. And what we want to prevent is having a number of individuals come through and be disappointed that we can't process them because, we're going to lose their trust and they're going to apply to another police service, which defeats the purpose of actually taking the ATS portion out of it, because we want individuals to be committed to us as an organization, as a service, as a city, before they commit to the OPP or any other police service.
Okay. Thank you. I also am interested in the different tools that you're going to use, and I would like to suggest one to you. You may have already considered it, but if you haven't, maybe you want to look into it. Movie theaters. More and more movie theaters are using the period before the movie starts so that's on your list, I gather from your smile.
Mr. Chair, I have to say, and my colleague just mentioned it to me, we have a very robust.
Good. Okay.
And I'm very pleased to say it was internal. It's all achieved internally through our own members. We have a very robust marketing strategy in place.
Excellent. Okay. And I commend you for contacting the Montreal Police Service. I'm very happy. Thank you very much for doing that. I look forward to what it is that they have to report back to you. And finally, I have just one last comment, and it's to do with a little bit what the Chief spoke about, the barriers that women have. I don't know if this is still the way it is, but it's likely on the physical aspect where there might be some barriers. And is it true that we still ask women to climb over a 6-foot wall? Is that still part of the testing?
We do not have to climb over if I can say, Mr. Chair.
No, 2 years ago they modified the testing through research and evidence-based practices, and you only have to look over the wall now because they try to make it more realistic to what actually happens now.
Right.
And fences are 6 feet tall, and they just have to look over. But there's some other tests that seem to be problematic. But the challenge we have with ATS is that they don't collect the data on each individual test. They just collect the data on did you pass or fail the entire physical component. That's a challenge for us in identifying if there's some challenges.
Okay. And the background check, it's number 8 on the list. Is there a reason why you put it number 8? Why is it number 8? Would it not make more sense if it was up closer at the top?
Mr. Chair, this is something we'll investigate as we go through and look at the pieces of the puzzle. What we find is that it's the most time-consuming portion of the whole process, and so putting it, and it's very expensive. When you look at it, it takes a background investigator roughly 40 hours to complete a file. So generally, then we're trying to make sure that we're down to the group of people that's their last step before we apply 40 hours of a backgrounder to it. But what we're learning is that there are a lot of ways to maybe split that in half earlier on, get a feel for whether the person would pass before we send them to have the more extensive one. So all of this is up for discussion, and I think we'll learn more as well about the drop-off at the background. If there is a significant drop-off at the background stage, then perhaps it's appropriate where it is. The data will help us have a look at that, and we can also see where it makes sense to invest. The decision to move the ATS certificate down is also really a good one because those are candidates nobody else knows about but us, and we get to form a relationship with them. So we're kind of trying all aspects of the strategy to come up with what's optimal.
Member Nicholson, you have a question?
Well, just a comment. I just thought I'd have a look at my my records here. On 17th of March 2006, the Outreach Recruitment Project made a presentation to the board, the results of a lot of investigations it did, and included 17 recommendations. The first one was that we should add a value of diversity. We haven't done it, and here we are in 2018.
So we do have in the audience some young potential police officer from the Algonquin College. I don't want you to be discouraged. We still want you. We'd like you to apply. So don't get some of these questions scares you off. If any other question from my colleague before I have a couple before you put your hand up, Director General. Inspector Cartwright, thank you for your presentation. One of the biggest concerns I hear from the community, and we heard it with you when we had the open houses, they need mentorship before they apply, because they fear when they are going to the process without any mentorship. When we say mentorship, we're not saying give them the answer to the question. We're asking you how you mentor them, how you guide them to apply, what they need to study. Like, should I read history about Canada or about US, whatever the test is. That's the mentorship, and I think more than once, and thanks to Deputy Bell, I usually send those names to him, and he passed them on to you folks. That any board member have some of those names, and someone ask a question with it. By all means, send it. We're not interfering with the process. We just want you to mentor them before they apply, because some of them, they're going to the test and they find it is out of their left field and they're costing them money, and next thing is a challenge to do it again. What have we doing about the mentorship program?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Mentorship is still being done. However, based on the current constable selection system, more mentorship can be done. one of the goals of the outreach team, of those additional members, will be to hold those information sessions, okay? To be able to have those outreach recruiters having individuals which they will mentor. And I must tell the board, we're not attempting to recreate the wheel here. We're attempting to reach an area where we were successful, we had greater success. Outreach team was able, by our own numbers, to have 40 to 60% greater numbers of diverse candidates coming through by actually the mentorship, by doing the mentorship, by actually being visible in the community. So what we have presented you to today, as some of it marketing strategy, will be absolutely new for this police service as technology has changed. But actually not forgetting the groundwork that needs to be done, which is the mentorship. Having a team of 4 recruiters, as we currently have now, and based on the length of the process that you have seen and the number of steps involved, and Director General Fraser was correct, 40 hours or up to 6 weeks to complete a background on one individual is very time-consuming and costly. That currently impacts our ability to mentor the number of individuals we would like to mentor. And having that marketing strategy we're putting forward, if it's going to attract more members, and that's where the personnel hours will be spent, to mentor those individuals so they have a greater likelihood of success.
I think Deb wants to add something.
And I must, as my colleague just mentioned, Stafford Miller, currently we are very much relying on internal membership. People are volunteering a lot of their time. And that's the individuals who are mentoring. They're mentoring candidates on their own. And when they believe those candidates are ready, they're forwarding them to us to highlight their success.
So it is okay with you folks when we hear someone wants to apply, need mentorship, needs some guidance in the process, to send them directly to you?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. That was something that just this afternoon, speaking to a colleague, and I told the staff superintendent directly, Superintendent Ford, send that individual directly to me. I will make the time.
Okay, it's good to hear. Thank you so much. Director General, you had your hand up for something?
Mr. Chair, I just want to recognize a couple of other folks in the room who helped a lot with our presentation. Brian McNally's here, I think, from Imaging Services, and they are the brains and the talent behind our communication strategy. So as we share it with you more and you see it unfold, you'll know that it's our own talented folks that are helping us out. And Heather Fisher has been coordinating all of this for us. She has a tremendous interest in the recruitment process and a real gift for keeping 10 people organized. So we want to thank both of them for helping us out on this.
Thank you very much, Director General, and thanks to all the team for a great job on the presentation. Received. Thank you very much, folks. Now we go to the Chief's verbal report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my thanks also to the team for a great presentation and all the work you've done. Apparently. If you want to get hired, you got to listen to my part here. They're still leaving. My staff aren't allowed to leave. Mr. Chair, I know that board members are aware of the SIU investigation currently underway in Westboro end of our city. As the SIU announced last night, our officers responded to a call for service at a grocery store for a man with a weapon. During the response, an officer-involved shooting occurred. One man is deceased. There were no auto police service members that were injured. This is a difficult incident for everyone involved, and no one wants to see a friend or a loved one hurt, and no member of our service wants to be involved in this type of situation. We expect this investigation to take some time. We need to allow that process to occur. While the SIU investigation is underway, a separate investigation on the incidents that occurred inside the grocery store is being conducted by the Auto Police Service. The SIU has given us carriage of that part of the investigation, and they will do the actual shooting. Supports have been put in place for all our members involved in this incident, both through the chain of command, through the Ottawa Police Association, and our peer support program. And I'll provide the board with updates as they come from the SIU. In late January, a man walked into an East End bank with a note indicating that he had a gun. That robbery set off a police response that I want to highlight as an example of how we work as a team. As soon as the robbery unit detectives were notified, they sent out an alert to frontline officers. A team of officers, including Sergeant Walter Dumay, Constables Cornelius Persine, Patrick Alden, Andrew Thompson, and Gurpreet Dhaliwal, converged on the area. With the assistance of a robbery detective, they located the suspect and arrested them. They were all supported by our comm center team and our operational center. The money was recovered and returned to the bank. It was exceptional teamwork, and I want to thank all the members that were involved in this. I also want to update you on the gun violence suppression strategy our service is engaged in. This issue continues to be a service-wide priority. Since the start of the year, we have seized 10 crime guns. Compliance checks and proactive police visits to problem areas and addresses continue. Our targeted response to the increase in shootings we saw at the start of the year remains focused on the individuals that are responsible. Several investigations remain underway, and we will continue to send a clear message that this kind of activity isn't acceptable in our community. At the same time, we do continue our partnership work with community groups and agencies on the implementation of the Ottawa Street Violence and Gang Strategy. Enforcement alone is not the answer. We must continue to work with the community to help identify those committing violence and to dissuade those who may be attracted to a lifestyle of gangs and criminality. We continue to focus also on the increase of opioids and drug overdoses in our community. 2017 saw approximately 30 opioid overdoses per month, the largest number of opioid overdoses related emergency department visits to date. At the end of January, we also saw an increase in serious overdoses at the 2 local supervised injection sites in Ottawa. This is a serious public health issue that we expect will continue. Our drug unit continues to find opioids and fentanyl, and it continues to conduct investigation and seize drugs. We have also made an naloxone available to all trained frontline police officers. The Ottawa Police Service issued kits have already been used 3 times by Ottawa Police Service members. Additionally, our school resource officers continue to partner with public health, all 4 school boards, Rideau-Wood Addictions and Family Services, and Maison Fraternité to ensure that students and parents groups have consistent and accurate information regarding substance use prevention, especially opioids and naloxone in schools. We're also watching for the predatory drug trafficking occurring outside supervised injection sites that we saw late last year. This type of activity garners complaints from residents, businesses, and the operators of the facilities, and we are aware of the issue. We continue to maintain a strong relationship with the operators of these sites. We also share in the goals of helping the most vulnerable in our community and keeping people safe. I next want to mention a recent achievement by the members of our Youth Advisory Committee, also known as YAC. Co-chairs Sabrina Teklab and Brianna Fayyad were invited to present at the United Nations Economic and Social Council in New York City this January. This global forum was an opportunity to highlight the collaborative work being done with our YAC team, and while there, they were invited to be part of the World Urban Youth Council's network. The highlights of the presentation included an outline of how YAC is structured and governed, how youth-led initiatives are implemented, and the breakdown of the 4 key pillars to youth and community safety: protection, prevention, partnerships, and disengagement and reintegration. The work these young people do is very important to our success as a service. This is a great opportunity to present on a world stage the excellent work that we are doing with our youth in our community. Mr. Chair, that's the verbal report today.
Very good news. Excellent. Thank you, Chief. To my colleague, any question on the Chief's verbal report? No? Receive. Thank you, Chief. We'll turn to item 9. Item 9 was held by Member Smallwood about consultation plan on the future deployment of conducted energy weapons. And I'll let you chair the meeting.
Okay. Thanks very much. First of all, I wanted to start off by saying that I was one of the people who was had a lot of concerns with the original deployment, the expansion of the deployment of CEWs. So I must say I was really happy and to read in your report that there was a decrease, that after the implementation of the usage of CEWs, you're indicating there was a decrease in the usage of other types of force, including a 39% reduction in the use of in the discharge of firearms. That's startling. It's just a wonderful piece of news. I just wondered, that's in 2015. Was that is that statistic just for that 1 year, or is that from 2015 to 2018?
So the sample size that we took was based upon the evaluation period that went 2014 to 2016. Okay. Certainly the trend we're seeing is very consistent. We just don't have the stats to support that at this point.
Okay, that's to me that's a really critical component to see that. I know that on page 4 there's a comment about calls for more de-escalation training. I'm assuming that's, by that, do you mean from the general public?
No, I think what you're referencing is the training provided to our officers. Sorry, maybe I have to look at the comment.
Well, it just says that there, on page 4, there's a comment that says, however, there have been recent calls for even more de-escalation training for police officers and a review of Ontario's use of force model.
Yeah, that is correct. That is coming from the community.
That's public. Right. Yeah. That's what I assumed. And there's a comment in there, which I know I have heard before, about a concern that the CEWs could become a weapon of convenience, that there would be, it's there and they just use it. So I think that's something that there's been a lot of comments and concerns about. On page 4 as well, there's a comment that I didn't quite understand. In the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th bullet down, it says, there's a comment, there was less support for distribution based on years of experience. Does this mean that more experienced officers were not as in favor of the deployment of CEWs?
No, I think what it's referencing is a current governance and the policy direction by the board is it's based upon years of experience, so you must be a first-class constable currently. Okay. And so the recommendation is that that's less of a variable.
Okay. On page 5, there's a comment that says, which I didn't understand, near the bullet near the bottom, it says, second bullet, it says, unfavorable environment conditions where CEW deployment would be catastrophic.
Mr. Chair, it's when the environment is not suitable to deploying a CEW, so lightning.
Okay, and water or something like
exactly,
that.
Exactly. So
okay, that's what I thought. I just want to confirm that. Page 6, it says, with respect to de-escalation training, and I thought this was really critical, very important, it says, the OPS has consistently exceeded training for CEWs required by the provincial government. And you go on to say that on page 7, you reference increased de-escalation and communication training, all of which I think are really great. And I'm just wondering, would it be possible as part of this just to give us a baseline when you talk about, for instance, consistently exceeding? Is there a possibility, and I'm sure you don't have it now, but is there a possibility to give us an idea of what is the baseline across the province? Maybe it's something we can get from the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards. How much training is the Big 12 are they giving? How much are we giving? And can we make a commitment to always be the leader in terms of that? I think you've made it very clear that this is really important. De-escalation training is really important. So I think it would be good if we can show that we are a leader in terms of de-escalation training for our officers, because for all the reasons that you have in your report here.
Yeah, as the report indicates, we'll be coming back before the board, so we can certainly include that.
That would be excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Any other question from my colleague about this? Okay, so okay, Madame Velket.
Merci. I'm wondering if we could get an idea of, just in general, use of force. What percentage is used?
Mr. Chair, we report to the board on a quarterly basis on the use of force, data and stats, and we can certainly, when the next report is due, we can certainly expand or answer any other questions with respect to the specifics of that.
Okay, so on item 9, we need to, item number 1, approve the consultation plan on a future deployment of conducted energy weapon as outlined in this report, and item 2, receive this report for information. So on item 1, it's item approve. Item 2, receive. Thank you. That would conclude our public portion of the meeting, folks, and I need a motion to move in camera. So move. Okay, thank you very much.